Welcome to Wisdom-Trek with Gramps. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, and we are on day 2576 of our trek. The purpose of Wisdom-Trek is to create a legacy of wisdom, to seek out discernment and insights, and to boldly grow where few have chosen to grow before. Today is our 45th lesson in our segment of Theology Thursday. Utilizing excerpts from the book titled, I Dare You Not to Bore Me with the Bible, written by Hebrew Bible scholar and professor, the late Dr. Michael S Heiser, we will invest a couple years going through the entire Bible, exploring short biblical lessons that you may have not received in Bible classes or church. The Bible is a wonderful book, and its pages reveal the epic story of God's redemption of humankind and the long bitter conflict against evil. Yet it is also a book that may seem strange to us at times. While God's Word was written for us, it wasn't written to us. Today's lesson is Treason Translation. A famous Italian proverb declares, Traduttore, traditore, which means translator, traitor. Those who assume this is true are unaware of how difficult it is to produce a translation. Every translator invariably discards the original text meaning at some point. A committee of scholars assemble to produce a translation that typically adopts the overarching philosophy of the translation. In the simplest terms, there are two. The first is called formal equivalence, which seeks to account for virtually every word in the original text by producing an English counterpart in translation. This is a word-for-word or literal translation. The second is called a dynamic equivalence. This approach seeks to capture the thought of the original verse in its context and then recreate that thought using whatever English words are most precise. This is a thought-for-thought translation. However, adopting this approach does not mean that all translators will apply it equally. There are also matters of interpretation. When the Bible text allows for more than one translation, due to not being clear in the context, grammar, or word usage, a translator needs to make his own decision, which can lead to controversy. Let's look at 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 1, which is illustrative of this potential hazard. First, in the ESV, it is good for a man not to have sexual relationships with a woman. Next, in the NASB, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Now in the NIV, it is good for a man not to marry. And finally, in the NLT, it is good to live a celibate life. The most word-for-word of these translations is the NASB, which captures the literal reading of the Greek words in this verse, particularly the verb touch, or haptomia. Other translations have moved away from the ambiguous touch to having sexual relations with, in the ESV. The most controversial renderings is the NIV, which is, it is good for a man not to marry, or the NLT, it is good to live a celibate life. How is it that these translators could go from a Greek word that means to touch to these other options? The answer is that the translators factored in what was to presume to be a wider context of the chapter, and ultimately the writer of 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 7 and 8, which was the Apostle Paul, described himself as single. His advice to the Corinthians in several places is that it would be wiser for those who were not married to remain unmarried. Because of the undefined present distress in chapter 7, verse 26, the context is presumed in chapter 7, verse 1 by the NIV and the NLT. These translations are certainly plausible, but they do have some problems. While Paul notes the present distress in chapter 7, verse 27, can we be certain that Paul was thinking of that distress in chapter 7, verse 1? Might Paul have been thinking about sexual immorality instead? The verses that immediately follow chapter 7, verse 1 speak frankly of sexual temptation in chapter 7, verses 2 through 4. If morality was on Paul's mind, then the ESV was more on target. The point would then be an admonition to avoid sexual contact outside of marriage, not to avoid marriage in itself. Translation isn't a matter of just matching words in one language to the words in another. Rather than considering Bible translators as traitors, we need to be sympathetic to their burden. Reading multiple translations can reveal the complexities of this process and help us to understand God's Word more fully. Now, the lessons that make up Theology Thursday on our Wisdom-Trek podcast for the next couple of years will satisfy the statement, I dare you not to bore me with the Bible. I trust that you'll enjoy them and, of course, not be bored. And if you found this podcast insightful, please subscribe and leave us a review. Then encourage your friends and family to join us and come along with us tomorrow for another day of Wisdom-Trek, creating a legacy. Thank you so much for allowing me to be your guide, your mentor, and most importantly, I am your friend as I serve you through the Wisdom-Trek podcast and journal. As we take this trek of life together, let us always live abundantly, love unconditionally, listen intentionally, learn continuously, lend to others generously, lead with integrity, and leave a living legacy each day. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, reminding you to keep moving forward, enjoy your journey, and create a great day every day. See you next time for more daily wisdom.